Good afternoon, friends. I am Rajesh Asudani Raqeeb.
Namaskar, this is Dr Vinod Asudani.
And today we both are here again with you through literary lens.
What have you brought today?
Yeah, today it's something different, Vinodji.
Yeah.
And something really important also. It's not a literary work. They
Then
are of
what-
course important.
Yes, then what it is?
It is literary criticism. We can call it. We have discussed some concepts of literary criticism earlier also.
Yeah, understanding of literary criticism is must to understand, appreciate, analyze and apply literature.
Many people, Vinodji, feel or they even think that literary criticism is not required. The contact between reader and the literary work is direct.
No,
You know?
because literature, especially the masterpieces, operate at multiple levels.
Yeah.
They do not have the simple meaning which can be deciphered or understood by any ordinary reader.
Yeah.
Therefore, we require experts who can tell us what this literary work is all about, and they can bring out the hidden elements, the hidden meanings, connotations, denotations, emotive meanings, and only then the literary work becomes fascinating.
Even something as straightforward as science requires science communicators. You know,
Therefore-
so literature is, of course, it's not so direct as to be understood just literally.
Exactly, because literature in itself is a well-developed discipline.
Yeah.
And today, Rajesh, we will be speaking about this literary criticism, rather a very important development
work,
in the literary history. It
It's
is
by Wordsworth.
William
and,
Wordsworth. Many people know him as nature poet.
Nature poet. We have also discussed some of his poems, and even we have discussed while discussing the revival of romanticism in English literature.
He is regarded as the father of romantic revival.
Yeah, but when he published his poetry, he felt a need, Vinodji, and this again brings out our point that why criticism is important.
It was in 1798. A collection of poems entitled
Lyrical ballads,
It was the collection of 23 poems. 19 were contributed by William Wordsworth.
and only 4 by Coleridge.
Yeah, but these poems, as Wordsworth has said in the preface, that they are different.
Yeah.
Not only in the style or the tone,
In the language,
but also in the choice of
themes.
subjects.
Yeah. When he reissued it in the extended version, he
Yes.
included many more poems in that also.
Right,
And he
felt
prefaced
a
it,
need.
yeah.
He felt a need to write an elaborate preface, so that he could explain the readers how these poems are different. Because he was afraid if
Yeah.
it is not done, either the poems will be highly appreciated without even understanding the word of them,
Or they will be totally underrated.
Yes.
I mean, as being just in a colloquial language.
Yes,
Right?
yes, and that's why he wrote this preface.
So this is called Preface to Lyrical Ballads. It was
Yes.
published in 1801, 1802, again 1805, right?
Yes.
And we are going to discuss some of the very important concepts in this essay. which is
let
called,
me clearly make it very clear that this the preface
Yeah.
is not simply confined to the explanation given by Wordsworth about his own poems,
Yeah.
but it goes beyond it.
Yes,
He
yes.
brings in lot many concepts of the literature, or rather literary criticism. They are very important for the students of literature, for those who want to understand literature, to understand all these things. For example, some of the important things that Wordsworth touches in this preface, he explains the choice of
Words.
stick themes.
The poetic diction, poetic language.
Yes.
A majority of the essays devoted to that, but we have
And the
already
famous definition of the poetry,
Yes.
then poetic process,
Process.
then qualifications of the poet,
Yeah.
and finally he says poetry is superior to history and
History,
philosophy.
yeah. So some of these concepts we are going to take up. Actually, we have already discussed about language and diction in our earlier episodes. Basically, he means that the language of poetry should be the language of masses. It should not be the language of classes, but it should be a common day-to-day language, but infused with meaning.
He says it is a rustic language.
Rustic.
Because rustics, those who are peasants or those who are uneducated people, the language that they use, it has to be the language of poetry as well.
And this is his conclusion also. In the concluding paragraph also, he says that if the ideas and feelings, they are, sufficiently higher level, they are of sufficient significance, then actually the language of prose and poetry is the same.
And again, he says even the choice of subjects
Yeah.
has to be from the rustic life. And he advances many reasons for it, right?
Yeah.
Because when you choose a rustic themes and the rustic language, you are in proximity with the nature. Your expression is natural, he says.
And you are, conveying the authenticity of human existence there.
And he says that rustic people experience passions with a greater intensity than the people who live in so-called urban sophisticated life.
So artificiality of life he actually abhors. And here, Vinodji, you have touched a very important notion which I would also like to discuss, is that he says that a poet is concerned with the depiction of the association of ideas and feelings as we do in the excited state of mind.
Now, what do you mean by this excited state of mind?
Yeah, here he says, normally when we are living our mundane life, we are conditioned by many things. But whenever we are passionate about something, excitement, and he clarifies it, excitement is not produced by administering the rigorous stimulants like drugs or alcohol or anything like that. But excitement results from when you experience a communion with the nature, when you are passionate about something like love, like hate, like anger, right? So the human passions and the nature, they are very potent sources of excitement, basically.
So briefly, what I have gathered from your statement, that when we feel something or when we experience something, if we experience or feel with all our existence or wholeheartedly, so that kind of excitement, or we can say the the feeling of bliss that we feel, that has to be communicated.
And then in this state, how we associate various ideas or feelings with each other, that brings out our authenticity, and it is the job of the poet to capture it and portray it in the poems.
Now, I think we must speak at length about his famous definition of poetry.
Oh yes, it's the spontaneous overflow of feelings, or rather it is the
spontaneous overflow of
powerful emotions recollected in the
moments of tranquility. Now, this definition brings out 4 important stages of poetic creation.
Definitely.
The first thing that Wordsworth emphasizes on is observation, or the experience of feelings or observation. This is the first stage.
And in this, a poet differs from a common person, man.
Yes. Otherwise, we will say everybody experiences all the whole range of emotions. Each one of us every day observes so many things. Then why we are not poets? Here we have to clearly understand that some of the qualifications that Wordsworth lays down for the poet. For example,
when a poet will observe a sunrise or a flower, it will be different. His or her sensibility
has to be intensified.
Number one, it has to be intense. It has to be, I would call it, wet or not dry.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
He has to capture the whole range of ideas, things, feelings, stories associated with, say, with the flower, for example. And another important thing is, a poet is gifted with a higher degree of aesthetics. He is able to appreciate anything which is really beautiful. Again, the term beautiful is to be taken in the right sense. It's not something that appeals to your eyes, but anything that appeals to any of the 5 senses is beautiful.
And including mind.
Including mind
as well. So this appeal to the senses or to the mind, and that pleasant appeal, I would call it, that is beauty.
And the poet must have higher degree of emotions and imagination as well.
Naturally, because only observation is not sufficient. When the poet observes, then the reaction of the poet and the imaginative transformation of that one incident, like take for example sunrise, or take for example a peasant girl Wordsworth meets in the meadows, right? So simple experience, it's a simple experience, but number one, the observation, the aesthetic appeal, and then the imaginative reaction of the poet.
Okay, he clearly says that poet can see what others are not able to see. He can hear what others are not able to hear. For example, if you meet a melancholic person, he does not speak anything, but the poet can imagine all sorts of the sorrowful words that he may speak under the situation.
Definitely. Like We Are Seven. The poem is called We Are Seven. It's by Wordsworth. A very simple poem. He meets a girl and he asks her, how many siblings do you have? She says 7. She says, where are they? And she says 1, 2, 3, 4 and 2 are in the ground. 1 is in the ground, buried, right? So he says, you are 6. And I say, no, we are 7.
So that memory of the dead sibling is beautifully captured in the poem.
Yeah. So you can call it denial of concept of death or survival after death, or whatever complicated themes you can weave into it. But the innocence of that girl, that is how it is captured by the poet.
So higher degree of emotion, higher degree of imagination, higher degree of sensibility.
Like daffodils, the flowers.
Yes.
The poet has chances to look upon the daffodils and everybody is familiar with that poem, right?
At one place, Wordsworth has said himself, even the meanest flower on the street has got a meaning.
Definitely. One impulse from vernal wood can teach you more of man, of moral evil and of good than 1,000 sages can.
Yes. And finally, the poet has to be endowed with, higher powers of communication, that is expression. Many people can feel this pleasure, right? Many people can have the aesthetic sense. But when it comes to poetic expression, they do fail in that. So poet should be capable of putting into the words that higher level of feelings or higher level of beauty or the imaginative transformation that he is able to create of.
And even he regards meter, rhyme and rhythm as the part of poetic expression. They beautify the poetic expression.
They make it pleasure super added.
Pleasure super added. They make it memorable, So these are the ornaments of poetry. They may not.
They are not essential. He says.
They are not.
If they are there, well. If they are not there, still it is okay.
Fine.
And this is a very subtle point. Many people cannot even appreciate or understand that how the poem can be a poem without
rhyme and rhythm.
Rhyme and rhythm and meter and
because they associate poetry only with rhyme and rhythm.
Yes, but here Wordsworth makes a very important observation. That the difference between the poetry and the prose is not of the difference of the meter, but it is the difference of the subject matter. It is some subjects are poetic, and when they are expressed even without meter, still that is poetry.
And even he goes so far as to say that highest kind of prose and highest kind of poetry are essentially the same.
But again, Rajesh, we will come to the criticism from S.T. Coleridge and T.S. Eliot. Both of them.
But before that, Vinodji, what is this recollected in tranquility?
So we will come back to the original definition. The first is observation. You observe certain event, incidents, feeling or experience. You experience something, right? Then the second is a state. He says, it is as soon as you observe something or as soon as you experience something, at that time poet must not express it in the poetic form.
Immediately you don't react and don't express it. It will not result in a good poetry.
So second stage is retention of that experience.
Like
why this retention is must, he says? Because in this intervening period, that is the interval which is there between observation and expression is a retention. So this feeling or incidents or experience, whatever it may be, it gets purified.
It gets purified. The churning happens inside you.
Because what happens when you are experiencing something, you experience with all desirable and undesirable stimuli.
But when you remember it afterwards, the memory is, so to say, sanitized. Psychologists also agree with this. When we remember our past, we remember it in a sanitized manner, not with all the attendant.
It is purged of the impurities.
Like for example, I'll give you. Suppose we go to the garden and have a very beautiful flowers and everything. But while going and coming, we have the transport issues, Vinod.
Yes.
But when we will remember it after 2 months, we will remember only the garden and pleasant experiences, not the transportation issues.
Exactly. When you remember your days at school, primary school, when you were actually at the primary school, you were afraid of the teachers. Sometimes teachers would beat you up, right? And you really hate the teachers. But when you remember now, after 40 years, you remember those teachers were wonderful.
And the second thing is that if an experience strikes you really deeply, the taste is that if you remember it afterwards, after some months, after some years, whatever we remember, it must have resonated with us at some level or the other.
That means the trivial experiences, trivial observations would automatically disappear
Yeah.
in this stage of
So
retention.
it's called sifting. It may be called sifting. You sift through those things.
So those things which are really important, they will stay
They will
on.
stick with you.
Yeah. And then the third stage is recollection.
Yeah,
When you try to recollect, you can recollect only those with which you were impressed, otherwise not.
Yeah. So then recollection has to be in tranquility.
Yes, again, this is very important.
Yeah. It's not that you coming and going and in the humdrum of life you can...
Yeah, in the hustle and bustle of the city, you cannot recall and write the poem. He says, remember here, we must tell our readers, right, or the listeners, that the Wordsworth came from the Lake District of England. The Lake District, which
most of his life he just...
it was a district which was famous for the natural scenery.
Yeah.
Natural scenes, natural surroundings. So he basically was born and grew up in the natural surrounding. So he has imbibed that appreciation for the nature, and that is why he says that he must recollect in the moments of tranquility, that is peacefulness.
And then you express it, and that is the true poem, or these are the qualifications of the poem. But Vinodji, as you said, Coleridge and Eliot later on.
The Coleridge, his close friend,
yeah.
He was the first person to attack these observations made by Wordsworth in Preface. He says, Wordsworth has said there is neither or there should not be any difference, fundamental difference between the language of poetry and prose.
Yeah.
And Coleridge comes and he says there is a fundamental difference.
And always there has been.
Between the poetry and prose. Because he says the poetry, the arrangement of the words does not correspond to the arrangement that you find in prose. The moment you shift the words, make a new arrangement, automatically the poetic diction comes in.
Yeah, I mean, even a common person, Vinodji, when he or she hears of poetry, he says that grammatical rules will not be followed here, right?
Yeah. The moment grammatical rules are cast off, that means the diction comes.
Simply people speak in that way and they think it is poetry.
Right. And secondly, he says, okay, when you say a rustic language, if the characters of the poetry are from the rustic life, then it is okay. But if the characters are from high class, then they will speak the language of the high class.
Definitely.
So you cannot say this authentic language is only the language of the rustics.
And here, Vinodji, I remember Jean-Paul Sartre.
Yes.
He said very important thing. He said poetry and prose are fundamentally different. Poetry and he equated the function of poetry with his subject-object distinction and the unification of the two. And he says only the poetry can adequately deal with this thing. Prose will say, I went to the garden.
Yes.
Right? But poetry will not say it like this. And really, it's not I. Why should I come first and the garden come afterwards? No.
So in poetry, you do not have any fixed order of the words.
Yeah, so world and we are not interlinked in the prosaic way. We are into the world. We are the world itself. Exactly. So this only the poetry can adequately express.
And then T.S. Eliot in the 20th century, in his famous essay, Individual Talent and
Tradition
Tradition,
and Individual
has criticized Wordsworth's
whole definition of poetry, this process.
He says that poetry is not
neither emotions, nor it is a recollection, nor in tranquility,
nor it is the expression of personality.
Yeah.
Rather, the entire poetic process is the depersonalization of the personality.
Yeah.
It is escape from personality. It is going away from personality.
Yeah.
And he says the process of the poetry is a objective process. Poet is just a receptacle who receives the ideas.
And his mind is like a catalyst.
So the goodness of the poetry, he says, depends upon the intensity of the emotion, not upon the personality of the poet.
How well the poet is able to combine various feelings and emotions and express them as a whole.
So audiences, you can go to our
earlier episode,
another video. Individual Talent and Tradition and Individual Talent by T.S. Eliot.
Yes, Eliot. There you can, we have discussed it in detail.
Yes.
Here, Vinodji, in Preface, Wordsworth brings before us a very important issue. He said poetry is not like history or philosophy or science or chemistry. Poetry is different and superior.
Yes.
To all of them.
That means he's trying to emphasize on the uniqueness of poetry. Poetry is not like any other subjects or the disciplines of the knowledge that we come across in our day-to-day life.
Maybe common perception is that if you ask a scientist or a chemist, they say poetry is useless.
Poetry is useless.
At best it's a relaxation.
Relaxation just for the sake of the entertainment. People indulge in the writing
and
reading of the poetry.
Wordsworth turns it head down.
Rajesh, I think this is very important and we will discuss this at length separately in our next episode, the uniqueness of poetry. So friends, Wait for that.
We'll be very back. Soon we'll be back
and we'll be discussing on the uniqueness of poetry.
Yeah.
Hope you like this video today.
Thank you.